Augustus. Rome's story as an empire begins with one man, Augustus, born Gaius Octavius in 63 BC, the great-nephew and adopted heir of Julius Caesar. When Caesar was assassinated in 44 BCE, the young Octavian, just 18 years old, suddenly found himself in the dangerous world of Roman politics. Ambitious and calculating, he outmaneuvered rivals like Mark Antony and Cleopatra, defeating them at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. With their deaths, Octavian became Rome's undisputed master. In 27 BCE, he took the title Augustus, meaning the revered one, carefully presenting himself not as a king or dictator but as the restorer of the republic. In truth, he concentrated power in his own hands, controlling the legions, the treasury, and the Senate itself. This delicate balancing act created the system we call the Roman Empire. Augustus's rule lasted over 40 years, and in that time he reshaped Rome. He expanded its frontiers into Egypt and Hispania, reorganized administration, reformed taxes, and built institutions for daily life like Rome's first fire brigade and police force. He funded massive building projects. The poet Horace said he found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. Most importantly, he began the Pax Romana, 200 years of relative peace and prosperity. By his death in 14 CE, Rome controlled around 2.5 million square miles and more than 50 million people. Augustus wasn't just the first emperor, he became the model for all who followed. His reign set the standard. The empire itself was his lega. Tiberius. When Augustus died in 14 CE, the empire passed to his stepson Tiberius, an accomplished general who had led campaigns in Germany and along the Danube. At 55, he was experienced, disciplined, and cautious, a man perfectly placed to inherit Augustus's system. His first years were competent and efficient. He kept Rome's finances strong, defended its borders, and avoided reckless expansion. The empire remained stable, and many thought he would continue Augustus's legacy smoothly. But Tiberius struggled with popularity. Reserved by nature, he showed little warmth to the Senate or the people. He relied heavily on his ambitious commander Sejanus, who used treason trials and purges to eliminate rivals. Even after Sejanus fell, paranoia took deep root, executions and accusations multiplied, leaving Rome's elite living in fear. In 26 CE, Tiberius withdrew from public life entirely, ruling from the island fortress of Capri. From the shadows, he issued commands while lurid rumors spread about cruelty and excess. His absence only deepened Rome's distrust. When he died in 37 CE at the age of 77, the city welcomed his death with open relief. Tiberius left the empire more secure and financially stable than he found it. Yet his reign is remembered less for competence than for suspicion and repression, showing how fear can erase achievement and turn stability into a chaos. Caligula. When Augustus' line finally led to Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, better known as Caligula, Rome thought they had a golden prince. Born in 12 CE, he was the beloved son of the famous general Germanicus, raised in army camps where soldiers nicknamed him Caligula, Little Boots. When Tiberius died in 37 CE, the 24-year-old Caligula stepped onto the throne with massive public support. At first, he gave Rome hope. He freed political prisoners, recalled exiles, and funded games and spectacles that thrilled the people. But only months into his reign, something shifted, possibly triggered by a serious illness. What followed built his legendary reputation for madness. Caligula drained the treasury with lavish spending, enormous gladiator shows, extravagant building projects, and even a massive floating bridge so he could gallop his horse across the sea. Ancient sources claim he declared himself a living god, demanded worship, and humiliated senators. His cruelty was infamous: executions without trial, public displays of sadism, and bizarre priorities, like supposedly planning to make his horse, Incitatus, a consul. By 41 CE, fear and rage caught up to him. Members of the Praetorian Guard, once sworn to protect him, assassinated the 28-year-old emperor in a palace plot. His rule had lasted just 4 turbulent years. Caligula's reign became a warning story of absolute power unrestrained, remembered less for policy than for showing how quickly imperial authority could turn into tyranny and spectacle. Claudius. When Caligula was assassinated in 41 CE, few expected his uncle Claudius to survive, much less rule. At 50, Claudius had been sidelined for years, mocked for his limp, stutter, and awkward manner. The Praetorian Guard dragged him out of hiding and declared him emperor, many assuming he'd be easy to control. What they got instead was one of Rome's most underestimated rulers. Claudius proved shrewd and practical. He strengthened central administration by using freedmen, former slaves, as skilled civil servants. He reformed Rome's finances, expanded the bureaucracy, and pushed for new infrastructure, including aqueducts, roads, and ports that improved trade and daily life. Militarily, his greatest triumph was the conquest of Britain in 43 CE, a bold campaign that added significant new territory to the empire and earned him lasting prestige. He also expanded into North Africa and the Balkans, making Rome more secure on multiple fronts. But his reign wasn't without turmoil. Claudius faced repeated plot from senators who resented his reliance on outsiders and his blunt approach. He also struggled with palace intrigues, most famously his marriages. His last wife, Agrippina the Younger, positioned her son Nero as heir. In 54 CE, Claudius died under suspicious circumstances, many believing Agrippina poisoned him. Despite those shadows, Claudius left Rome stronger, larger, and more efficiently governed than when he began. The emperor no one expected to succeed instead reshaped the empire with determination and quiet intelligence. Nero. When Claudius died in 54 CE, his teenage stepson Nero, just 16 years old, became emperor, the youngest Rome had ever seen. At first, his rule seemed promising. Guided by wise advisors like Seneca, he reduced taxes, promoted the arts, and offered public entertainment that made him wildly popular with the people. But as Nero grew older, his darker instincts surfaced. Obsessed with being seen as an artist and performer, he sang, played the lyre, and even competed in public games, something shocking for a Roman emperor. Behind the stage, he became ruthless. He allegedly ordered the deaths of his own mother Agrippina, his wife Octavia, and countless rivals who threatened his image. The event most tied to his name came in 64 CE, the Great Fire of Rome. The blaze destroyed much of the city, and whispers spread that Nero had played music while the Capitol burned. Whether true or not, his decision afterward angered Rome further. He seized burned land to build his extravagant palace, the Domus Aurea, complete with a colossal statue of himself. As conspiracies mounted and revolts broke out across the empire, Nero lost support of the Senate and even his guards. In 68 CE, declared a public enemy, he fled and committed suicide at age 30, famously lamenting, "What an artist dies in me." With his death, the Julio-Claudian dynasty came to a violent end, leaving Nero remembered as both patron of culture and symbol of tyranny. Vespasian. After Nero's death in 68 CE, Rome spiraled into the year of the Four Emperors, a brutal civil war where generals fought for power and the empire nearly tore itself apart. Out of that chaos rose Vespasian, a seasoned soldier from a modest, equestrian family. When he seized power in 69 CE, many doubted if he could steady the empire. But that's exactly what he did. Vespasian cut through the extravagance of previous rulers. He rebuilt the treasury drained by Nero's spending, even imposing practical but unpopular taxes, including one on public toilets, brushing off criticism by saying, "Money doesn't smell." His down-to-earth, sometimes blunt style made him stand out from the excess of his predecessors. Militarily, he secured Rome's hold over rebellious provinces, most famously finishing the Jewish revolt, which led to the destruction of Jerusalem's Second Temple in 70 CE. The spoils from that campaign funded one of Rome's most iconic projects, the Colosseum, the vast arena meant for the people, not just the elite. For 10 years, Vespasian gave Rome something it badly needed: stability, financial recovery, and confidence in imperial leadership. When he died peacefully in 79 CE at age 69, the empire was firmly back on track, and his Flavian dynasty was secure. Vespasian isn't remembered for wild luxury or scandal, but for rebuilding Rome's strength, leaving behind monuments and institutions that endured for centuries. Titus. When Vespasian died in 79 CE, his son Titus became the first Roman emperor to directly inherit power from his biological father, a major test for the new Flavian dynasty. Many feared he would be another Nero. After all, Titus had once been criticized for extravagance and a scandalous affair with the Judean queen Berenice. Instead, he surprised Rome by becoming one of its most admired rulers. Within just weeks of taking power, disaster struck. Mount Vesuvius erupted, burying Pompeii and Herculaneum under ash and killing thousands. Rather than retreat, Titus poured imperial resources into rescue and relief, providing aid to survivors and compensating cities destroyed by the volcano. His willingness to help earned him enormous goodwill. As if that weren't enough, the following year massive fire ravaged Rome itself, and again Titus responded with generosity, covering reconstruction costs from his own funds. But he's equally remembered for completing and officially dedicating the Colosseum, the grand symbol of the Flavian dynasty. The opening games reportedly lasted 100 days, filled with gladiatorial contests, wild beast hunts, and mock naval battles, marking it as a gift to the Roman people. Titus reigned for only 2 years before dying suddenly in 81 CE at age 41. Despite the brevity, Romans remembered him as a darling of the human race, a leader who met disaster with compassion and left behind a model of fairness and generosity unmatched in his time. Domitian. When Titus died unexpectedly in 81 CE, power passed to his younger brother Domitian. Where Titus had been beloved, Domitian quickly made Rome uneasy. Determined to rule in his own way, he embraced open autocracy. He strengthened the imperial bureaucracy, raised pay for soldiers, and personally oversaw justice, often showing himself to be a tireless, detail-obsessed administrator. But his style came at a cost. Domitian demanded titles like Dominus et Deus, Lord and God, and openly pushed the Senate to the margins. He ruled with suspicion, relying heavily on informers. Treason trials and executions became a regular feature of his reign, leaving the senatorial class resentful and terrified. At the same time, he made real marks on the empire. Domitian fortified Rome's frontiers, improved the economy, and invested heavily in infrastructure and the arts. He even completed the Arch of Titus and restored the Colosseum after fire damage. Ordinary citizens and soldiers often respected him. It was the aristocracy who hated him most. As years passed, his paranoia only deepened. He withdrew into the palace, trusted almost no one, and unleashed purges against perceived enemies. Finally, in 96 CE, conspirators within his own court, including his chamberlain and possibly even his wife, assassinated him. After his death, the Senate rushed to condemn his memory through damnatio memoriae, erasing his name from inscriptions. Yet his reign remains polarizing, a capable ruler whose efficiency was overshadowed by fear and tyranny. Trajan. In 98 CE, after the assassination of Domitian and the steady rule of Nerva, the empire turned to a man who would become a legend, Marcus Ulpius Traianus, better known as Trajan. Born in Spain, he was the first emperor from the provinces, a career soldier beloved by his legions. His rise signaled that Rome's empire was no longer just for Italians. It was truly Mediterranean and beyond. Trajan wasted no time proving himself. He launched ambitious building programs in Rome and across the provinces, new aqueducts, roads, libraries, and perhaps most famously, Trajan's Forum and Trajan's Column, celebrating his victories in vivid stone relief. But it was in war that he shined brightest. His conquest of Dacia, modern Romania, was a massive triumph. The rich gold mines there poured wealth into Rome, funding his programs and spectacular games. Later campaigns pushed east against the Parthian Empire, briefly bringing Rome to its maximum size, stretching from Scotland to Mesopotamia. At its height, more than 60 million people lived under Roman rule. Yet Trajan was admired not only as a conqueror, but as a model of justice and fairness. He earned the title Optimus Princeps, the best ruler, because senators, soldiers, and citizens alike respected him. Even future emperors were praised by the phrase, "May you be luckier than Augustus, and better than Trajan." He died in 117 CE, leaving behind the largest Roman empire in history and a legacy so positive it still defines how we picture the ideal emperor. Hadrian. After Trajan's death in 117 CE, the empire passed to his cousin and adopted son, Publius Aelius Hadrianus, or Hadrian. Where Trajan had been a conqueror, Hadrian was a stabilizer. He believed Rome had expanded enough, and instead of chasing new wars, he focused on strengthening what was already Rome's vast empire. His clearest symbol of this was in Britain, Hadrian's Wall, a 73-milestone barrier still standing today. It marked the northern limit of Roman Britain, less about keeping everyone out, and more about controlling trade, troop movements, and the constant pressure of border tribes. Hadrian was a tireless traveler. He visited nearly every province of the empire, inspecting defenses, reforming administration, and showing himself directly to the people. Few emperors were as hands-on, but he wasn't just about military order. He was a lover of Greek culture. Interest in literature, architecture, and philosophy flourished under his patronage. He rebuilt the Pantheon in Rome, still one of the most awe-striking buildings on earth, and constructed his vast villa at Tivoli, full of art and gardens. Hadrian's life also carried tragedy. His beloved companion Antinous drowned in the Nile. Hadrian honored him by founding cities and even a cult in his name, shocking some Romans but revealing Hadrian's personal grief. When Hadrian died in 138 CE, he left an empire more secure, more cultured, and more stable than he found it. If Trajan symbolized expansion, Hadrian symbolized endurance. Marcus Aurelius. In 161 CE, Marcus Aurelius Antoninus became emperor, a man remembered not just as a ruler, but as Rome's philosopher king. Unlike many before him, Marcus cared little for luxury or spectacle. Instead, he immersed himself in the teachings of Stoic philosophy, a belief in self-discipline, virtue, and duty above all else. His private reflections, later known as Meditations, still inspire readers nearly 2,000 years later. But his reign was anything but peaceful. Almost immediately, enemy tribes pushed across the empire's northern borders. For years, Marcus spent more time in military camps than marble palaces, leading campaigns along the Danube during the Marcomannic Wars. At the same time, Rome endured plague, likely smallpox, which killed millions, destabilized the economy, and struck down soldiers as fast as enemies did. Despite the crises, Marcus Aurelius governed with patience, fairness, and humility. He shared power with Lucius Verus, then later with his own son Commodus, believing in collaboration even when it complicated things. On campaign, he wrote quietly at night, reminding himself not to despair, not to chase glory, but to act with reason and justice. Marcus died in 180 CE, exhausted from years of struggle. Romans mourned him as the model ruler they had always wished for, a man who embodied wisdom under pressure. Ironically, his heir Commodus would undo much of what he preserved, making Marcus the last great emperor of Rome's golden age. Commodus. When Marcus Aurelius died in 180 CE, the empire passed to his 19-year-old son Commodus, the first biological father-son succession in nearly a century. Hopes were high, but Commodus couldn't have been more different from the philosopher king. Where his father embodied discipline and duty, Commodus craved indulgence, spectacle, and glory on his own terms. At first, Commodus signed a quick peace with Rome's northern enemies, eager to return to the pleasures of the capital instead of fighting long frontier wars. In Rome, he styled himself Hercules reborn, often dressing in lion skins and wielding a club. Even stranger, he insisted on performing as a gladiator in the Colosseum, killing wild animals and dueling opponents who likely never dared harm him. The people watched both amused and disturbed as their emperor turned public bloodsport into a stage for his ego. Meanwhile, real governance collapsed. Commodus left administration to corrupt favorites and sold political offices to the highest bidder. Paranoia grew as he executed senators and rivals, while his obsession with divine status alienated Rome's elite. By the late 180s, plots swirled. In 192 CE, on New Year's Eve, his own inner circle moved against him. Commodus was strangled in his bath by a wrestler. His death ended the Antonine dynasty and threw Rome into another civil war. Commodus is remembered not as the heir of Marcus's wisdom, but as a megalomaniac whose vanity and recklessness marked the decline of Rome's golden age. Septimius Severus. When Commodus was assassinated in 192 CE, Rome plunged into chaos again. Four rivals fought for control in what's called the Year of the Five Emperors. Out of the blood and confusion rose a tough North African general named Septimius Severus. By 193 CE, he seized Rome, crushed rivals, and founded the Severan dynasty. Severus ruled like a soldier first, politician second. He massively increased the size and pay of the army, granting soldiers new privileges and making their loyalty the cornerstone of his power. He stationed his own legions in Italy itself, breaking an old tradition that left Rome guarded mostly by the Praetorian Guard. This effectively shifted the balance of power. Emperors no longer answered to the Senate. They answered to their troops. Militarily, Severus expanded Rome's edges, campaigning in Mesopotamia, Arabia, and Africa. He strengthened defenses along the frontiers and rebuilt cities damaged by years of turmoil. But behind the victories was a heavy cost. His military spending drained the treasury and forced new taxes that burdened ordinary citizens. To the Senate, Severus offered little but contempt. He executed senators who opposed him and relied more on soldiers and legal advisors than Rome's old aristocracy. His reign formalized Rome's shift into an autocratic military state. Severus died in 211 CE while leading a campaign in Britain, advising his sons Caracalla and Geta on his deathbed to enrich the soldiers and despise all others. That phrase summed up his empire: Rome strong, but increasingly dominated by its armies, not its politics. Diocletian. By the late 3rd century, Rome was collapsing under constant invasions, bankrupt finances, and emperors who rarely lasted a few years. In 284 CE, a tough Illyrian soldier named Diocletian seized power, and instead of patching holes, he rebuilt the empire's system from the ground up. His most famous move was the Tetrarchy, rule of 4. Realizing the empire was too vast for one man, Diocletian divided power among 2 senior emperors, Augusti, and 2 junior deputies, Caesars. Each ruled a different region, making government faster, defense stronger, and succession clearer. For a time, it worked. Rome had stability it hadn't seen in decades. Diocletian also launched sweeping reforms. He reorganized provinces, overhauled the tax system, and tied Rome's economy more tightly to military needs. He expanded the army and reinforced borders, ensuring the empire could repel constant threats. But his reign also carries infamy. In 303 CE, Diocletian began the great persecution of Christians, ordering churches destroyed, scriptures burned, and believers forced to sacrifice to Roman gods under penalty of death. It was the harshest anti-Christian campaign Rome ever attempted, and though it failed to stamp out the religion, it left lasting scars. Remarkably, when Diocletian grew weary, he became the first Roman emperor to voluntarily retire in 305 CE, retreating to his palace in modern Croatia to tend his gardens. He left behind a stronger, more organized empire, but one more rigid, militarized, and divided than ever. His system bought Rome another century of survival. Constantine the Great. When Diocletian's Tetrarchy broke down into civil war, one man emerged from the chaos. Constantine, proclaimed emperor by his troops in 306 CE. Over the next 2 decades, he defeated rival emperors and became sole ruler of the Roman world. But it wasn't just his victories, it was the choices he made afterward that reshaped history. Constantine's most famous turning point came at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312 CE. According to legend, before the clash he saw a vision of a Christian symbol in the sky with the words, "In this sign, conquer." He ordered his soldiers to fight under that emblem, won a decisive victory, and declared his support for Christianity. Within a year, he issued the Edict of Milan, granting Christians freedom of worship after centuries of persecution. But Constantine's ambitions went beyond religion. He founded a brand new capital on the site of Byzantium, renaming it Constantinople. Strategically placed between Europe and Asia, it became the empire's new power center and one of the greatest cities in the world for the next 1,000 years. He also reorganized the government, strengthened gold currency, and maintained military strength while openly favoring the church with land and privileges. Constantine was baptized on his deathbed in 337 CE, sealing his role as Rome's first Christian emperor. His reign didn't just change Rome, it changed the course of Western civilization. By linking empire and Christianity, and by building Constantinople, Constantine set the foundations for medieval Europe and the Byzantine world that followed.